The Arizona Territory, 1874. Amelia Price knelt in the hard-packed dirt outside her small cabin, the late afternoon sun burning across her shoulders as she yanked stubborn weeds from her struggling garden. 3 years in this unforgiving land had hardened her hands but not her resolve. The small plot of vegetables was her quiet defiance against a wilderness that had already taken too much. "Mama, look!" 5-year-old Thomas came running around the corner of the cabin, his dark blonde hair catching the sunlight, a wooden toy clutched in his small hand. The sight of him still caught in her throat sometimes. How much he looked like James. Her husband's eyes, her husband's smile. "Careful with that stick, Thomas," she called, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. "Don't run so fast near the edge." Their cabin stood on a small rise overlooking the valley, the Mogollon Rim's dramatic cliffs visible in the distance. Beautiful and deadly, that was Arizona. The settlement where they had first arrived lay 20 miles to the east. Nothing but charred timber and painful memories now. As Thomas played in the dirt nearby, Amelia's mind drifted back to that night 3 years ago. The screams, the flames reaching toward the star-filled sky. James pulling her from their burning home, thrusting baby Thomas into her arms, telling her to run. The arrows that found him before he could follow. She'd fled into the darkness, with her infant son pressed against her chest, his cries muffled against her nightdress. Behind her, Apache war cries had mingled with the crackling flames and dying screams of neighbors. 23 settlers dead. Only she, Thomas, and 2 others had survived. The settlers from the nearest town had found her 2 days later, half dead from exposure, still clutching Thomas. They'd told her it was a miracle. She'd told them it was a curse, to live when so many had died. To remember. "Hate keeps you strong," old Mrs. Blackwood had whispered to her at James's makeshift funeral. "Don't you ever let it go, girl. That's all we've got out here." Amelia had taken that advice to heart, rebuilding her life around twin pillars, protecting Thomas and never forgetting who had destroyed everything she loved. The Apache were devils in human form, that's what everyone said. She believed it with every fiber of her being. After a year in the crowded settlement 30 miles west, she'd surprised everyone by using James's savings to build this isolated cabin. A woman alone with a child? They'd questioned. But Amelia had learned to shoot, to hunt small game, to be as hard as the land required. The solitude suited her grief, and here she could raise Thomas away from the whispers of pity. "Thomas, time to come in," she called as the sun began its descent behind the cliffs. "Wash up for supper." Inside their small cabin, she stirred the rabbit stew simmering over the fire. The single room was neat, almost sparse, but had touches of comfort. A colorful quilt on the bed they shared, a small bookshelf with the few volumes she'd salvaged, a wooden horse James had carved for Thomas before he was born. After supper, as she washed the dishes in a basin of water hauled from the stream half a mile away, Thomas played quietly on the floor. "Mama, tell me about Papa again," he said suddenly. Amelia's hands stilled in the soapy water. Thomas asked less frequently now, but the request still pierced her heart. "Your papa was the bravest man I ever knew," she began, the familiar words a ritual between them. "He built houses with his hands and could make a fence straight as an arrow. He sang terrible songs that made me laugh, and he loved you more than anything in this world." "More than you?" Thomas asked with a child's curiosity. "Different than me," she smiled sadly. "He had the biggest heart." "Did the bad Indians kill him?" Thomas asked, his young face solemn. Amelia felt the familiar knot of hatred tighten in her chest. "Yes. The Apache attacked our settlement, but he saved us, Thomas. Remember that. He saved us." Later, after Thomas was asleep in their bed, Amelia sat by the dying fire, mending one of his shirts by the weak light. Outside, the wind had picked up, moaning around the corners of the cabin. Something about its pitch sent a shiver down her spine. She set aside her sewing and reached for the rifle James had taught her to use, checking that it was loaded. A distant howl, wolves perhaps, echoed through the valley. They rarely came this close to the cabin, but the winter had been harsh. Game was scarce, and predators grew bold when hungry. Amelia banked the fire and climbed into bed beside Thomas, pulling him close. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by dreams of flames and shadows moving just beyond the light. The howling came closer in the pre-dawn hours. Amelia woke with a start, instantly alert. Not just wolves, something else. She slipped from the bed, grabbed her rifle and moved to the window. In the faint moonlight she could see them. 4 wolves circling near the chicken coop. Beyond them, at the edge of the trees, a darker shadow moved. Her blood ran cold. A man on horseback watching. The silhouette was unmistakable, the distinctive outline of an Apache warrior. "No," she whispered, fear clawing at her throat. "Not again." Thomas stirred in the bed. "Mama?" "Shh! Stay there, Thomas," she commanded, keeping her voice steady despite the terror flooding her veins. The wolves were growing bolder, moving toward the cabin now. The chickens squawked in panic, and the shadow rider remained, watching, waiting. Waiting for what? For the wolves to drive them out, for the perfect moment to attack. Amelia raised her rifle, her hands steady despite her racing heart. One wolf ventured too close to the door. She fired. The shot cracked through the night air, and the wolf yelped, staggering before collapsing. The other wolves scattered momentarily but didn't retreat, and now the rider was moving, spurring his horse forward. "Thomas, under the bed," Amelia ordered, her voice calm despite the panic rising inside her. "Now!" The boy scrambled to obey as she reloaded the rifle. The distant thunder of hoofbeats grew louder. The Apache was coming. The wolves regrouped, emboldened by hunger. One leapt at the door, powerful jaws snapping at the wood. Amelia fired again, missing in her haste. Outside, the rider was drawing closer, and she was caught between 2 dangers, wolves at her door and an Apache warrior charging toward her cabin. In the moonlight, she caught a glimpse of his face as he rode into the clearing. High cheekbones, intense eyes, war paint streaked across his features. He carried a rifle of his own, along with a knife at his belt. This was no peaceful visit. "Stay hidden," she whispered to Thomas, who whimpered softly under the bed. The wolves turned their attention to the approaching rider, momentarily distracted from their assault on the cabin. In that moment, something unexpected happened. The Apache raised his rifle and fired, not at the cabin but at the wolves. One fell instantly, the others scattered but didn't flee. Confusion roiled through Amelia. Why would he? The Apache dismounted in one fluid motion, positioning himself between the wolves and the cabin. When the largest wolf lunged at him, he fired again, then drew his knife as another attacked from the side. The blade flashed in the moonlight as he fought with a terrifying precision. Transfixed, Amelia watched through the window as the warrior battled the wolves that had threatened her home. When the last one retreated into the darkness, he stood breathing heavily. Blood, his own or the wolves', she couldn't tell, glistening on his arm. Then he turned toward the cabin. Amelia raised her rifle again, pointing it squarely at the door. "I'll shoot," she called out, her voice stronger than she felt. "Don't come any closer." There was a pause, then a deep voice responded in accented English. "The wolves will return. Your shot, it will bring more danger." "The only danger I see is you," she replied, finger steady on the trigger. "The boy," the man said. "He is safe?" The question caught her off guard. "Why do you care?" Instead of answering, the Apache moved toward his horse, which had remained surprisingly calm throughout the fight. From a pack he retrieved something and approached the door slowly, hands visible. "Medicine," he said, "for wounds. The wolves will return with others. You should not stay here tonight." "We're not going anywhere with you," Amelia spat, even as she registered the truth in his words. Wolves hunted in larger packs than the 4 she'd seen. These might have been scouts. A soft whimper from under the bed drew her attention for a split second. When she looked back, the Apache had placed whatever he was carrying on the doorstep and retreated several paces. "Why are you helping us?" she demanded. His silence stretched long enough that she thought he might not answer. Finally he spoke, his voice low and measured. "Not all blood is shed in hatred," he said cryptically. "Then there is a place, safe from wolves, 2 miles north by the Red Rocks. I will go there. You may follow or stay. The choice is yours." With that he mounted his horse and rode into the darkness, leaving Amelia stunned and confused, her rifle still aimed at where he had stood. "Mama!" Thomas crawled out from under the bed, his eyes wide with fear. "Is the bad Indian gone?" She lowered the rifle slowly. "Yes, he's gone. But I don't think he was here to hurt us." "He killed the wolves," Thomas said with a child's simple observation. "The wolves were going to eat our chickens." "Yes, Amelia murmured, still trying to make sense of what had just happened. Yes, he did. She opened the door cautiously, rifle ready. On the doorstep sat a small bundle wrapped in leather, the medicine he'd mentioned. Beside it lay a dead wolf, its powerful body now still. Evidence that the encounter had been real, not some strange dream. Inside the leather bundle, she found herbs and a paste that smelled of pine and earth. For wounds, he'd said, but neither she nor Thomas was injured. The distant howl of wolves made her decision for her. They were returning, and in greater numbers. "Thomas, we need to go," she said, moving quickly around the cabin. "Put on your warmest clothes." "Where are we going, Mama?" he asked, confused by the sudden urgency. How could she explain when she didn't understand herself? "Somewhere safe," she replied, packing a small bag with food and Thomas's wooden horse. "Just for tonight." She debated leaving a note in case someone from the settlement came looking, then laughed bitterly at the thought. No one would come. No one had visited in months. With Thomas bundled in his warmest clothes and her rifle loaded, Amelia stepped out into the night. The moon had slipped behind clouds, leaving the landscape in darkness. "Which way, Mama?" Thomas whispered, clutching her hand. "North," the Apache had said, "by the red rocks." She knew the formation, a distinctive outcropping visible for miles. "This way," she said, lifting Thomas into her arms. He was getting too big to carry far, but fear lent her strength. "Hold tight." They moved through the darkness, Amelia's heart pounding with each step. Was she making a terrible mistake, following an Apache warrior into the night? Everything she'd believed for 3 years screamed that this was madness. But the wolves' howls, closer now, urged her forward. Between certain death and uncertain safety, there was only one choice. The journey seemed endless, Thomas growing heavier in her arms, her breath coming in painful gasps. Just as her strength began to fail, she saw it, a flicker of light ahead, near the base of the red rocks. A small fire burned in a sheltered hollow, and beside it sat the Apache warrior. He looked up as they approached, his expression unreadable. Amelia set Thomas down, but kept him close, her rifle still in hand. "We had no choice," she said, her voice cold despite her exhaustion. "The wolves returned." The warrior nodded once, then gestured to the fire. "Sit. Rest." Thomas stared at the man with undisguised curiosity. "Did you really kill the wolves? With your knife?" "Thomas," Amelia warned, pulling him closer. But the Apache's expression softened slightly as he looked at the boy. "Yes, wolves are not evil. They are hungry. But they cannot have you for their meal." This strange statement, delivered so matter-of-factly, startled a laugh from Thomas. The sound, so rare and precious these days, sent a jolt through Amelia. Her son was laughing in the presence of an Apache warrior, the very people she had taught him to fear. "What's your name?" Thomas asked boldly. Before Amelia could stop him, the warrior answered, "I am called Notah. I'm Thomas. That's my mama, Amelia." Notah nodded acknowledgement but said nothing more, turning his attention back to the small fire. Amelia settled Thomas beside her, as far from Notah as the small hollow would allow. The warmth of the fire soon had the boy's eyelids drooping, and within minutes he was asleep against her side. "Why did you help us?" she asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. Notah studied her across the flames, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "You believe all Apache are killers," he stated rather than asked. "I know what I saw," she replied, the familiar anger rising. "Your people destroyed our settlement, killed my husband. 23 people died that night." "Not my people," he said quietly. "Not my band." "You're all the same," she insisted, though a seed of doubt had taken root. "As all white eyes are the same?" he countered, his voice still calm. "The ones who hunt Apache children, who burn our crops, who break treaties before the ink is dry." She had no answer for that. "There was a raid," he continued after a moment. 3 summers past, near the big canyon. Canyon Creek, she supplied, her throat tight. "That was our settlement," he nodded. "Not my band. Renegades. Men who left our ways, who follow no chief but their own anger." "And I should believe you?" she asked, though the conviction in her voice had weakened. "Believe what you wish," he replied. "But ask yourself, if I wanted you dead, why fight wolves to save you?" The question hung in the air between them, unanswerable. "Sleep," he said finally. "I will watch." The wolves will not come here. Despite her determination to stay awake, exhaustion soon pulled Amelia into uneasy slumber, her dreams filled with flames and wolves and dark eyes, watching through the smoke. Amelia woke with a start, momentarily disoriented by the red rock walls around her and the unfamiliar bedding beneath her. Thomas still slept soundly beside her, but there was no sign of Notah. Panic seized her until she spotted him outside the small cave, crouched by a freshly built morning fire. The events of the previous night came rushing back: the wolves, the unexpected rescue, the strange journey to this shelter. In the harsh light of day, her decision to follow an Apache warrior seemed even more incredible, yet here they were, alive and unharmed. She rose quietly, careful not to wake Thomas, and stepped outside. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and sage. From this vantage point, she could see for miles across the valley, including the distant shape of her cabin. "Your home stands," Notah said without turning. "No fire." She wondered if he was referring to the wolves or to the memory that haunted her, her first home engulfed in flames. "The wolves?" she asked. "Gone. For now." He stirred something in a small pot over the fire. "Hungry?" Her instinct was to refuse, but hunger won out. She nodded stiffly. As he ladled some kind of stew into a wooden bowl, she noticed his arm. A deep gash ran from elbow to wrist, crudely bandaged with a strip of cloth now soaked with blood. "You're injured," she said, the words escaping before she could stop them. He shrugged. "Wolf's tooth. It will heal." She thought of the medicine bundle he had left at her door, the one she had hastily shoved into her pack before fleeing. "I have the herbs you brought. For wounds." Something that might have been surprise flickered across his face. "You took it." "I did," she admitted, unsure why this seemed significant. She retrieved the bundle from her pack and held it out to him. Their fingers brushed as he took it, and she pulled back quickly, unsettled by the contact. "I can help," she offered awkwardly. "With the wound. I've treated worse." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded once and extended his injured arm. As she unwrapped the soiled bandage, she was conscious of his eyes on her, watching her every move. The gash was deep and angry, the skin around it hot to the touch. "This needs cleaning," she said, professional concern overriding her unease. "Do you have water?" He indicated a water skin nearby. She dampened a clean strip of cloth from her pack and began gently cleaning the wound. He made no sound, though she knew it must be painful. "Why were you near my cabin last night?" she asked as she worked, unable to contain the question any longer. His silence stretched so long she thought he might not answer. "I watch," he finally said. "The boundaries. Where my people's land meets the white settlements." "You're a scout?" "A guardian," he corrected. "I ensure peace." "By yourself?" "Others watch other places." As she applied the herbal paste to his wound, she considered this. "You've seen me before." "At my cabin." It wasn't a question, but he nodded. "Many moons. You and the boy." The thought that he had been observing them, perhaps for months, should have terrified her. Instead, she felt a strange sense of relief. If he had wanted to harm them, he'd had countless opportunities. "Thank you," she said quietly, wrapping a fresh bandage around his arm. "For last night. For the wolves." He accepted her thanks with a slight inclination of his head. "Mama?" Thomas's sleepy voice came from the cave entrance. He rubbed his eyes, then brightened when he saw them. "Mr. Notah, you're still here." "Mr. Notah," the warrior repeated, the formality clearly amusing him. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Are you hungry, Thomas?" Amelia asked, accepting a second bowl of stew from Notah. "Mr. Notah has made breakfast." Thomas nodded eagerly and joined them by the fire, accepting his bowl with a politeness that made Amelia proud, despite the strangeness of the situation. "This is good," Thomas declared after his first bite. "Better than Mama's rabbit stew." "Thomas!" Amelia scolded, embarrassed, but Notah's eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. Not quite a smile, but close. "Different spices," he explained to Thomas, "from the desert plants." "Can you teach Mama?" Thomas asked innocently. Before Notah could respond, a distant sound caught their attention, hoofbeats, approaching rapidly. Notah was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. "Inside," he commanded. "Both of you." "Who is it?" Amelia asked, already pulling Thomas toward the cave. Soldiers, Notah said grimly. Blue coats. Cavalry. What were they doing this far from the fort? And what would they do if they found her and Thomas in the company of an Apache? You should go, she said urgently. If they find you here, inside, he repeated, more forcefully. Now. There was no time to argue. She hurried Thomas into the cave, heart pounding. Through the entrance she watched as Notah quickly scattered the fire and kicked dirt over the evidence of their meal. The riders appeared moments later, 4 cavalrymen in dusty blue uniforms, led by a sergeant whose face she recognized from her infrequent trips to the settlement. Behind them rode a civilian, Marcus Webb, one of the survivors from Canyon Creek. "Notah," the sergeant called, reining in his horse. "Thought we might find you up here." To Amelia's astonishment, there seemed to be no hostility in the greeting. Notah lowered his rifle but remained alert. "Sergeant Miller," he acknowledged. "You are far from your fort." "Tracking a party of renegades," Miller explained. "Raided a ranch near Prescott 2 days ago. Killed the rancher, took his wife. Webb here thinks it might be the same band that hit Canyon Creek a few years back." At the mention of Canyon Creek, Amelia moved forward instinctively, emerging from the cave despite Notah's warning glance. "Mrs. Price?" Webb's eyes widened in surprise. "What in God's name are you doing out here?" "With him?" The accusation in his tone was unmistakable. The sergeant's hand moved to his sidearm, suddenly wary. "Wolves," Amelia explained quickly. "They surrounded my cabin last night. Notah, he saved us. Killed 3 of them and brought us here for safety." Webb's expression darkened with suspicion. "And you just followed him? An Apache? After what they did to James? To all of us?" "It wasn't his band," she said, the words surprising her even as she spoke them. "The raid on Canyon Creek, it was renegades." "That's what they all say," Webb scoffed, "once they're caught." "Notah is scout for the army," Sergeant Miller interjected, his tone suggesting this wasn't the first time he'd had to explain this. "Has been for 2 years. Best tracker we've got." This revelation struck Amelia like a physical blow. Notah worked with the army? The same army that hunted down Apache raiders? "Is that true?" she asked, turning to Notah. He met her gaze steadily. "I track those who break the peace, Apache or white. It does not matter. Wrong is wrong. He helped us find the men who attacked Canyon Creek," Miller added. "Most of them, anyway. 3 are still out there, the worst of the lot, led by a dog called Red Knife." "Red Knife," Amelia repeated, the name sending a chill through her. She had heard the settlers speak of him in whispers, an Apache renegade known for his brutality. "We think he's behind this latest raid," Miller continued. "Heading south, probably toward Mexico. Notah was going to meet us at the fort, but when he didn't show..." He shrugged. "Figured we'd find him on his usual patrol route." Thomas had emerged from the cave, clinging to Amelia's skirt as he stared wide-eyed at the soldiers. "Mama, are these bad men?" he whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "No, Thomas," she assured him quickly. "They're soldiers. They protect people." Webb dismounted, approaching them with a scowl. "You shouldn't be out here alone, Amelia. It's not safe. You and the boy should come back to the settlement." "I'm managing fine," she replied stiffly. "With Apache help, apparently," Webb muttered, casting a dark look at Notah. "Mr. Notah killed the wolves," Thomas piped up. "They were going to eat our chickens, but he stopped them." Webb's expression softened slightly as he looked at the boy. "Is that so? Well, that was fortunate." He turned to Amelia. "Still, you should come back with us, at least until this renegade business is settled." Amelia hesitated. The settlement had never felt like home. Too many pitying looks, too many reminders of what she'd lost. But with renegade Apache in the area, "The boy should be safe," Notah said quietly. "The woman, too." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Concern, perhaps, or understanding. "We'll go," she decided. "Just until it's safe." She turned to Notah. "Will you continue tracking these renegades?" He nodded once. "It is what I do." "Then we'll return to the settlement," she told Webb, but only temporarily. As Webb helped Thomas onto his horse, Sergeant Miller conferred quietly with Notah, pointing at a map spread across his saddle. Amelia gathered her few belongings, pausing when she found the medicine bundle Notah had given her. On impulse, she approached him as the others prepared to leave. "Be careful," she said, her voice low. "These renegades, they sound dangerous." "All men are dangerous when filled with hate," he replied. Then, after a moment's hesitation, watch for my signal when it is safe to return home. 3 hawks circling above your cabin. How will you make hawks circle? She asked, puzzled. The ghost of a smile touched his lips again. Apache secret. It wasn't until she was riding behind Webb, Thomas secure in front of him, that Amelia realized how profoundly her world had shifted in less than a day. The Apache she had sworn to hate had saved her son's life, had protected them both, and now rode off to hunt down the true perpetrators of the Canyon Creek massacre. Nothing was as simple as she had believed. Nothing at all. The settlement hadn't changed in the month since Amelia had last visited. The same dusty main street lined with wooden buildings, the same suspicious glances from settlers who had never quite forgiven her for choosing isolation over their community. 2 weeks had passed since the soldiers had brought her and Thomas back, and each day felt longer than the last. They stayed with the widow Simmons, a kindly woman who asked few questions but offered plenty of food and a small room at the back of her house. Thomas had quickly adapted, finding playmates among the settlement children, but Amelia felt increasingly restless, her thoughts constantly returning to her cabin and to Notah. "Any word from the patrol?" she asked Sheriff Donovan when she encountered him outside the general store. He shook his head. "Nothing yet, but that's not unusual. Takes time to track renegades through those mountains." She nodded, hiding her concern. 2 weeks with no news. Were they still pursuing Red Knife? Was Notah safe? "You know," the sheriff said, studying her closely, "folks are talking about your Apache friend." "He's not my friend," she replied automatically, though the denial felt hollow. "He helped us, that's all." Still, it's odd. Most Apache don't go out of their way to help white settlers, especially not women living alone. There was an unspoken question in his words. "Sergeant Miller said he works with the Army," she pointed out. "As a scout." "True enough," Donovan conceded. "Still, can't be too careful. These alliances shift with the wind out here." As she walked back to the Simmons house, Amelia found herself defending Notah in her thoughts. He wasn't like the Apache raiders who had destroyed Canyon Creek. He had principles, honor. He had risked his life for her and Thomas. That evening, as Thomas played with wooden soldiers on the floor, Amelia sat by the window watching the fading light paint the distant mountains in shades of purple and gold. Somewhere out there, Notah was tracking the men who had taken everything from her. "Mrs. Price?" Mrs. Simmons appeared in the doorway. "There's someone asking for you at the back door. Native woman." Surprised, Amelia followed her to the kitchen. In the gathering dusk stood an elderly Apache woman, her face deeply lined, her eyes sharp and assessing. "You are the one," the woman said in heavily accented English. "The one Notah speaks of." Amelia's heart quickened. "You know Notah? Is he all right?" The old woman held out a small bundle wrapped in deerskin. "He sends this. Says you will understand." Taking the bundle with trembling hands, Amelia unwrapped it to find a small carved eagle and a piece of paper with a crude map drawn on it. A location was marked with an X, not far from her cabin. "What does it mean?" she asked. But when she looked up, the woman was already walking away, disappearing into the shadows between buildings. That night, Amelia barely slept, the carved eagle clutched in her hand. Was it a warning? A message? She studied the map until she memorized every detail, recognizing the landmark indicated, a distinctive rock formation about a mile north of her cabin. The next morning, she made her decision. "We're going home," she told Thomas as she packed their few belongings. "But what about the bad Indians?" he asked, confusion in his young eyes. "Not all Indians are bad," she said gently. "Remember Mr. Notah? He helped us." "Is Mr. Notah coming to see us?" Thomas asked hopefully. Amelia hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe." Mrs. Simmons tried to dissuade her, as did Sheriff Donovan when he caught them loading their belongings onto a borrowed wagon. "At least wait for the patrol to return," he urged. "Make sure it's safe." "I've waited long enough," Amelia replied firmly. "We'll be fine." The journey back to their cabin took most of the day. As they approached, Amelia felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. The cabin stood undisturbed, just as they had left it that night 2 weeks ago. "Home!" Thomas exclaimed happily, running ahead as soon as the wagon stopped. Amelia followed more cautiously, rifle ready, but there was no sign of danger. Inside, everything was as they had left it, save for a fine layer of dust. By nightfall, she had the cabin in order again, a fire burning in the hearth, Thomas tucked safely in bed. Only then did she take out the carved eagle and the map. Tomorrow, she decided. Tomorrow she would investigate the marked location. Dawn brought clear skies and a cool breeze. After settling Thomas with chores and strict instructions not to wander, Amelia set out, the map and eagle secure in her pocket, her rifle a comfortable weight in her hands. The rock formation was exactly where the map indicated, its distinctive shape visible from a distance. As she approached, she saw no sign of anyone, but a sense of being watched prickled at the back of her neck. "Notah," she called softly. "Are you there?" Movement caught her eye, a figure emerging from behind the rocks. But it wasn't Notah. It was a young Apache woman, perhaps a few years younger than Amelia, with a baby strapped to her back. "You came," the woman said in surprisingly good English. "Notah said you would." "Who are you?" Amelia asked, wary but curious. "I am Kiona, Notah's sister." She gestured to the baby. "This is my son." "Where is Notah? Is he all right?" Kiona's expression grew serious. "He is hurt, but alive. He sent me to find you." "Hurt? How badly?" Alarm coursed through Amelia. "The soldiers found Red Knife's camp. There was a fight. Notah killed Red Knife, but—" She touched her side, indicating a wound. "He cannot travel to the fort. The soldiers brought him to our camp, but our healer is gone." Understanding dawned. "He needs medicine. That's why he sent for me." Kiona nodded. "He said you know healing ways," Amelia thought quickly. "I need to get Thomas. My son. I can't leave him alone." "Bring him," Kiona said. "Our camp is safe. Hidden." The decision should have been difficult, to take her son into an Apache camp, but somehow it wasn't. "Wait here. I'll return with Thomas and supplies." An hour later, they were following Kiona along a hidden trail through the mountains. Thomas, initially wary of the strange woman, had quickly become fascinated by her baby, peppering her with questions that she answered with patient amusement. The Apache camp was smaller than Amelia had expected, just a handful of wickiups nestled in a sheltered canyon. Several women watched their approach with cautious curiosity, while children paused in their play to stare. "They will not harm you," Kiona assured her, leading them to a wickiup set slightly apart from the others. "Notah is here." Inside, the air was thick with the scent of herbs and smoke. Notah lay on a bed of furs, his chest bare except for a blood-soaked bandage wrapped around his torso. His eyes were closed, his breathing labored. "Notah," Kiona said softly. "She has come." His eyes opened, focusing slowly on Amelia. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by something that might have been relief. "You came," he murmured. "Of course I came," she replied, kneeling beside him. "You saved us. Now let me help you." Thomas hung back, eyes wide at the sight of the wounded warrior. "Is Mr. Notah going to die?" he whispered. "No," Amelia said firmly, already examining the bandage. "No, he is not." The wound was deep, a knife slash that had cut through muscle and narrowly missed vital organs. Infection had set in, the skin around the gash angry and hot. "I need clean water, fresh bandages, and my medicines," Amelia instructed Kiona, already unpacking her supplies. "And a fire. The water must be boiled." As Kiona hurried to comply, Amelia turned to Thomas. "I need you to be brave. Can you help Kiona while I take care of Mr. Notah?" Thomas nodded solemnly. "Like how you helped Mrs. Jenkins when her baby came?" "Just like that," she agreed, grateful for her son's resilience. For the next several hours, Amelia worked tirelessly, cleaning the wound, applying poultices of herbs both from her own supplies and those Kiona provided, and finally stitching the deepest part of the gash with careful, even sutures. Throughout it all, Notah remained conscious, watching her with intense eyes, never once crying out, despite the pain she knew her ministrations caused. "You have done this before," he observed, as she tied off the last stitch. "Many times," she replied, wiping sweat from her brow. "My father was a doctor, he taught me." "A medicine woman," he murmured, "strong hands, good heart." The simple compliment warmed her more than it should have. "The fever is the danger now," she said, businesslike. "We must keep it at bay." Night had fallen by the time she finished. Thomas had long since fallen asleep beside Kiona's son, the two boys curled together like puppies. The women of the camp had brought food, a rich stew and flat bread which Amelia ate gratefully. "You should rest," Kiona told her, bringing a blanket. "I will watch my brother." But Amelia shook her head. "I'll stay with him. The next few hours are critical." Kiona studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You care for him." It wasn't a question, and Amelia didn't deny it. "He saved my son. He hunted down the men who killed my husband." "He has spoken of you," Kiona said softly. "The brave white woman who lives alone, the one with fire in her eyes." Embarrassed, Amelia busied herself checking Notah's bandages. "He needs water. Small sips." Through the night she kept vigil, bathing Notah's brow with cool water when the fever spiked, helping him drink the bitter herbal tea Kiona had prepared. Near dawn his fever broke, and he fell into a more peaceful sleep. Amelia finally allowed herself to rest, curling up beside Thomas on the furs Kiona had provided. She woke to sunlight filtering through the Wikiup's entrance, and the sound of voices outside, men's voices, speaking English. She rose quickly, straightening her rumpled clothes, and stepped outside to find Sergeant Miller and 2 other soldiers standing with Kiona. "Mrs. Price," Miller said, surprise evident in his voice, "didn't expect to find you here." "I'm helping with Notah's wound," she explained. "It was infected." Miller nodded. "We were worried when he didn't make it back to the fort. Came to check on him." He glanced toward the Wikiup. "How is he?" "Better. The fever has broken, but he needs rest." "Well, that's good news. He's a brave man. Took on Red Knife himself while we were dealing with the other renegades." Miller's respect was evident in his tone. "Saved that rancher's wife, too. She's safe back at the fort." "And Red Knife?" Amelia asked, hardly daring to hope. "Dead," Miller confirmed, "along with most of his band. We got them all this time, Mrs. Price. The ones who hit Canyon Creek. It's over." The words she had waited 3 years to hear washed over her like a cleansing rain. Over. The men who had killed James, who had destroyed their settlement, were gone. Justice, or something like it, had been served. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "and thank Notah when he wakes." Miller touched his hat respectfully. "We'll head back to the fort. Let them know he's in good hands. Send a patrol in a few days to check on him and to escort you and your boy home, if you're ready." "That won't be necessary," she said with quiet certainty. "We can find our own way." After the soldiers departed, Amelia returned to the Wikiup to find Notah awake, Thomas sitting beside him, chattering about the camp and the other children. "The soldiers were here," Amelia told him, checking his bandages. "They said Red Knife is dead. All of them are." Notah nodded once. "It is finished. You killed him," she said softly. "The man who led the raid on Canyon Creek. For 3 summers. I hunted him," Notah replied, his voice still weak but steady. "For what he did to your people and to mine." "Your people?" "Red Knife killed my father," he explained. "When my father refused to join his renegades, he betrayed our ways, brought shame to all Apache." Understanding dawned. "That's why you worked with the army, to find him." "To restore balance," Notah corrected. "When blood is spilled, there must be justice, or hatred grows like poison in the heart." The wisdom in his words struck her deeply. Hadn't she carried that poison for 3 years, letting it define her, isolate her? "Thank you," she said simply, taking his hand in hers. "For everything." His fingers tightened around hers. "You saved my life. We are in balance now." But it wasn't balance she felt as their eyes met. It was something new. Something that made her heart beat faster and her cheeks warm. In the days that followed, as Notah grew stronger, Amelia and Thomas remained at the camp. Thomas thrived among the Apache children, learning their games and picking up words in their language with a child's ease. Amelia spent her time with Notah, changing his bandages, helping him walk short distances as his strength returned, and talking about their pasts, their losses, their hopes. She learned of his childhood in the mountains, of Apache traditions and beliefs. He listened as she spoke of James, of her life before Canyon Creek, of her dreams for Thomas. In the evenings, they sat together outside his Wikiup, watching the stars emerge while Thomas played nearby. "Your cabin," Notah said one such evening a week after they had arrived. "You will return soon." She hesitated. I'm not sure. Thomas is happy here." "And you?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. "I've never felt safer," she admitted, "or less alone." Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a hope. "There is a place," he said carefully, "between the mountains and the valley, near water, good land, not Apache territory, not white settlement, between worlds." "What are you saying, Notah?" He took her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "Two broken hearts can make one whole one. Two paths can join to make a new trail." Her breath caught in her throat. "Are you asking me to build a life with you?" "If you wish it," he said simply. "You, Thomas, me. A family." The word family resonated through her like a bell. Family, something she had lost, had never thought to find again. "The settlers," she began, thinking of the obstacles. "Your people. Some will not understand," he acknowledged, "on both sides. But times change. The old hatreds cannot rule forever." "And Thomas?" she asked, watching her son as he played with Kiona's boy, their laughter carrying on the evening air. "He has Apache brothers now," Notah said with a small smile. "And a father, if you allow it." Tears filled her eyes at the tenderness in his voice. "You would be his father?" "I already am," Notah replied, "in my heart." She thought of the pain that had driven her for so long, the hatred she had nursed like a flame, and she thought of this man who had risked everything to right a wrong, who had shown her that love could grow even in the most barren places. "Yes," she whispered, her decision made. "Yes, I wish it." His smile, the first true smile she had seen from him, transformed his face, filling it with a joy that matched her own. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, a promise rather than a demand, and Amelia felt something long frozen within her begin to thaw. When they parted, she saw Thomas watching them, a hopeful question in his eyes. "Come here," she called to him, holding out her hand. He approached cautiously, looking between them. "Mama, how would you feel," she asked carefully, "if Mr. Notah came to live with us? If he became your new papa?" Thomas's eyes widened. "For always?" "For always," Notah confirmed. A smile broke across Thomas's face like sunrise. "Yes," he exclaimed, throwing himself into their arms. "Yes, please." As she held her son and the man she had once sworn to hate but now loved, Amelia felt the last shards of her grief and anger fall away. There would be challenges ahead, prejudice to face, a new life to build. But together, they were strong enough to meet them. Epilogue. 2 years later, the homestead nestled between the mountains and the valley had flourished under their care. A sturdy cabin, larger than Amelia's original one, stood near a clear stream. Fields of corn and beans spread across the fertile soil, and a small orchard of fruit trees promised future harvests. Amelia hung laundry on the line, pausing to watch Thomas and his little sister Luna, born a year after she and Notah had wed in a ceremony that combined both their traditions. The children chased butterflies in the garden, their laughter a sweet counterpoint to the sounds of Notah working nearby, repairing a fence. Their life wasn't always easy. There had been hostility from both sides. Settlers who shunned them, Apache who distrusted Notah's choice. But they had found allies too. Sergeant Miller, now captain, who visited occasionally with his family, Kiona and her husband, who had built their own home nearby, even old Mrs. Simmons, who had surprised everyone by declaring that love was love no matter the color. Slowly their homestead had become a meeting place, a neutral ground where Apache and settler children played together, where trade happened peacefully, where old wounds began to heal. "They're coming," Thomas called excitedly, pointing down the trail where riders approached. Today was special, a gathering to celebrate the peace accord Notah had helped negotiate between his band and the territorial government. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning, a recognition of rights and territories that might, with care, prevent future bloodshed. As guests arrived, Apache families, settlers from nearby homesteads, soldiers in their dress uniforms, Amelia felt a profound gratitude wash over her. From the ashes of tragedy, something beautiful had grown. Notah appeared beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. "Happy?" he asked, though he knew the answer. "Complete," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "Who would have thought that night, with the wolves?" "I knew," he said with quiet certainty. When I saw you standing in your doorway, rifle ready to protect your son, your spirit called to mine. Even though I hated you, she teased gently. You hated a shadow, he corrected. Not me. She turned in his arms to face him, seeing in his eyes the same love that filled her heart. No more shadows, she promised. Only light. As they joined their guests, their children running ahead, Amelia reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from hatred to understanding, from fear to trust, from isolation to community. The path had not been straight or easy, but it had led to this moment, this life, this love, and in the end, that was all that mattered. This is the story of Notah and Amelia. Though fictional, it represents a real dream, a world where love is stronger than hate, where respect overcomes prejudice, and where wounded hearts can heal together. It's a tribute to the courage of those who choose love, even when everything around them says it's impossible. Because in the end, true love sees no color, no origin, only soul. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end of this story. If the journey of Notah and Amelia moved you, we invite you to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who loves a good love story, and most of all, subscribe to our channel. From the bottom of our hearts, your support helps us continue telling meaningful stories full of love, redemption, and life-changing turns. And don't go just yet. At the end of this video, another emotional story from our channel will appear. Click and let yourself be surprised once more.